a book where the fire burns not to warm, but to annihilate knowledge. From Bluetooth earbuds, drones, and flat-screen TVs to cancel culture, lack of attention span, and the quickening of the pace of entertainment, Ray Bradbury foreshadows many aspects of our everyday life in the 21st century in the bestseller that sold over tens of millions of copies around the world. Have you already guessed what we are talking about? That's right, it's Fahrenheit 451. Let's dive through the pages of a dystopian masterpiece that will leave you questioning the very fabric of society. You should stay tuned to find out. But before that, Part 1. The Hearth and the Salamander. In the distant future, Guy Montag is a fireman employed to burn outlawed books, along with the houses they are hidden in. One fall night while returning from work, he meets his new neighbor, Clarice McClellan, a teenage girl whose free-thinking ideals and liberating spirit cause him to question his life and perceived happiness. Montag returns home to find that his wife Mildred has overdosed on sleeping pills, and he calls for medical attention. Two emergency medical technicians later pump her stomach and change her blood. After they leave to rescue another overdose victim, Montag overhears Clarice and her family talking about their illiterate society. Shortly afterward, Montag's mind is bombarded with Clarice's subversive thoughts and the memory of Mildred's near death. Over the next few days, Clarice meets Montag each night as he walks home. Clarice's simple pleasures and interests make her an outcast among her peers, and she is forced to go to therapy for her behavior. Montag always looks forward to the meetings, but one day, Clarice goes missing. In the following days, while he and other firemen are ransacking the book-filled house of an old woman and drenching it in kerosene, Montag steals a book. The woman refuses to leave her house and her books, choosing instead to light a match and burn herself alive. Jarred by this suicide, Montag returns home and hides the book under his pillow. Later, Montag asks Mildred if she has heard anything about Clarice. She reveals that Clarice's family moved away after Clarice was hit by a speeding car and died 4 days ago. Dismayed by her failure to mention this earlier, Montag uneasily tries to fall asleep. Outside, he suspects the presence of the mechanical hound, an 8-legged robotic dog-like creature that resides in the firehouse and aids the firemen in hunting book hoarders. Montag awakens ill the next morning. Mildred tries to care for her husband, but finds herself more involved in the parlor wall entertainment in the living room, large televisions filling the walls. Montag suggests he should take a break from being a fireman, and Mildred panics over the thought of losing the house and her parlor wall family. Captain Beatty, Montag's fire chief, visits Montag to see how he is doing. Sensing his concerns, Beatty recounts the history of how books have lost their value and how the firemen were adapted for their current role. Over decades, people began to embrace new media like film and television, sports, and an ever-quickening pace of life. Books were abridged or degraded to accommodate shorter attention spans. At the same time, advances in technology resulted in nearly all buildings being made with fireproof materials, and firemen preventing fires were no longer necessary. The government then instead turned the firemen into authors of society's peace of mind. Instead of putting out fires, they were charged with starting them, specifically to burn books, which were condemned as sources of confusing and depressing thoughts that complicated people's lives. After an awkward exchange between Mildred and Montag over the book hidden under his pillow, Beatty becomes suspicious and casually adds a passing threat before leaving. He says that if a fireman had a book, he would be asked to burn it within the following 24 hours. If he refused, the other firemen would come and burn it for him. The encounter leaves Montag utterly shaken. Montag later reveals to Mildred that, over the years, he has accumulated books that are hidden in their ceiling. In a panic, Mildred grabs a book and rushes to throw it in the kitchen incinerator. But Montag subdues her and says they are going to read the books to see if they have value. If they do not, he promises the books will be burned and their lives will return to normal. Part 2. The Sieve and the Sand. Mildred refuses to go along with Montag's plan, questioning why she or anyone else should care about books. Montag goes on a rant about Mildred's suicide attempt, Clarice's disappearance and death, the woman who burned herself, and the imminent war that goes ignored by the masses. He suggests that perhaps the books of the past have messages that can save society from its own destruction. Even still, Mildred remains unconvinced. Conceding that Mildred is a lost cause, Montag will need help to understand the books. He remembers an old man named Faber, an English professor before books were banned, whom he once met in a park. Montag visits Faber's home carrying a copy of the Bible, the book he stole at the woman's house. Once there, After multiple attempts to ask, Montag forces the scared and reluctant Faber into helping him by methodically ripping pages from the Bible. Faber concedes and gives Montag a homemade earpiece communicator so that he can offer constant guidance. At home, Mildred's friends, Mrs. Bowles and Mrs. Phelps, arrive to watch the parlor walls. Not interested in this entertainment, Montag turns off the walls and tries to engage the women in meaningful conversation, only for them to reveal just how indifferent, ignorant, and callous they truly are. Enraged, Montag shows them a book of poetry. This confuses the women and alarms Faber, who listens remotely. Mildred tries to dismiss Montag's actions as a tradition firemen act out once a year. They find an old book and read it as a way to make fun of how silly the past is. Montag proceeds to recite a poem, specifically Dover Beach, causing Mrs. Phelps to cry. Soon, the two women leave. Montag hides the books in his backyard before returning to the firehouse late at night. There, Montag hands Beatty a book to cover for the one he believes Beatty knows he stole the night before, which is tossed into the trash. Beatty reveals that, despite his disillusionment, he was once an enthusiastic reader. A fire alarm sounds and Beatty picks up the address from the dispatcher system. They drive in the fire truck to the unexpected destination, Montag's house. Part 3. Burning Bright. Beatty orders Montag to destroy his house with a flamethrower, rather than the more powerful salamander that is usually used by the fire team, and tells him that his wife and her friends reported him. Montag watches as Mildred walks out of the house, too traumatized about losing her parlor wall family to even acknowledge her husband's existence or the situation going on around her, and catches a taxi. Montag complies, destroying the home piece by piece, but Beatty discovers his earpiece and plans to hunt down Faber. Montag threatens Beatty with the flamethrower, and after Beatty taunts him, Montag burns Beatty alive. As Montag tries to escape the scene, the mechanical hound attacks him, managing to inject his leg with an anesthetic. He destroys the hound with the flamethrower and limps away. While escaping, he concludes that Beatty had wanted to die a long time ago and had purposely goaded Montag as well as provided him with the weapon. Montag runs towards Faber's house. En route, he crosses a road as a car attempts to run him over, but he manages to evade the vehicle, almost suffering the same fate as Clarice and losing his knee. Faber urges him to make his way to the countryside and contact a group of exiled book lovers who live there. Faber will be leaving on a bus heading to St. Louis, Missouri, where he and Montag can rendezvous later. Meanwhile, another mechanical hound is released to track down and kill Montag, with news helicopters following it to create a public spectacle. After wiping his scent from around the house in hopes of thwarting the hound, Montag leaves. He escapes the manhunt by wading into a river and floating downstream, where he meets the book lovers. They predicted Montag's arrival while watching the TV. The drifters are all former intellectuals. They have each memorized books should the day arrive that society come to an end, with the survivors learning to embrace the literature of the past. Wanting to contribute to the group, Montag finds that he partially memorized the book of Ecclesiastes, discovering that the group has a special way of unlocking photographic memory. While discussing about their learnings, Montag and the group watch helplessly as bombers fly overhead and annihilate the city with nuclear weapons. The war has begun and ended in the same night. While Faber would have left on the early bus, everyone else, possibly including Mildred, is killed. Injured and dirtied, Montag and the group manage to survive the shockwave. When the war is over, the exiles return to the city to rebuild society.